I am going to compliment the Dallas Cowboys because you know why? They did what they were supposed to do, and they went inside to their roots, to the trenches. We're going to talk more about them and the rest of the NFC East here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open, and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is a fact, Jack. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On NFL podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure you tap into that location each and every day. Whether you watch or listen, we will be there. Tap in so you do not miss an episode. An episode like the one today that is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets. Win your first $5 bet wins. And shout out to the everydayers who join us. And if it's your first time, I hope you get a reason to come back, because here's what we're going to do. We're going to land this little thing here in 30 minutes, and we're going to end up talking about the NFC East and doing a bit of a roundup, having David Harrison, my shotgun guest every single Wednesday, host of Locked On Commanders and Locked On NFL Squads, along with Cody Rourke. Also, we are going to let him tell us what's going on in Washington, potential Super Bowl, because Washington Commanders are actually going to be playing in Washington for the first time since I was a kid. And in the middle of the show, the Bengals did what they do. That's right. They addressed the needs, but did they really address the needs? We'll talk about them. But at the top of the show, we got to take time to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. We give them a lot of attention for negative stuff. So just to show you that it's all equal opportunity around here, I'm going to tell you right now, I think the Dallas Cowboys did a superb job in the draft. They didn't shoot for the stars, David Harrison. What they did was go right down into those trenches that they are known to be good for.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the conversation that led up to draft weekend, was whether the Dallas Cowboys were going to be dumb at number 12 or whether they're going to be smart at number 12. Dumb would have been to take a wide receiver. And that's what, look, it was a sexy pick. There were a lot of mocks that had guys like Matthew Golden going to the Cowboys and things like that. And it's no knock on Matthew Golden or any other receiver they might have considered at number 12. The bottom line is, and we talked about it on this very program, this very day before the draft kicked off, you can have all the weapons in the world if you want to, but if your quarterback is laying on his back, looking at the top, looking at that big old jumbotron they have in the middle of AT&T Stadium, those receivers are worthless, right? The wide receiver position is incredibly dependent on the quarterback, on the offensive line, and the scheme. The most talented dude in the world isn't going to do anything if those three things are not in line, at least, to a relative point. So the Dallas Cowboys did the right thing. They went to the trenches. They didn't go to the trenches just once. They went to the trenches a couple times on the defensive side, on the offensive side. Wig, in a lot of ways, the NFL roster building experience is complicated. It's more complicated than a lot of people want to give it credit for being, but in some ways, it's actually simple in a lot of ways. And that is, again, shout out to Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. As I say it all the time, I stole it from them and I steal it from them every year. Mm-hmm. It's hard to be good when you're bad in the trenches. Yeah. It's hard to be bad when you're good in the trenches. Now, are Tyler Booker, Donovan Ezeraku, Johnny Cornelius, all these guys going to pan out? I don't know. We'll find out. But if they do, guess what? The Dallas Cowboys, they're going to be back to relevancy sooner than they probably are expected to right now. Whether or not it's Dak Prescott at quarterback, whether it's Brian Schottenheimer as the head coach, that's to be determined as well. But as far as addressing the right positions for the Cowboys, they did a good job.
I think they did a good job too, and we'll piggyback on that a little bit in just a second. But I don't hear from the guys that Locked On Cowboys, because one indicator that you have done a good job. I said this about quarterbacks yesterday. When you have a quarterback, even one that might not work, you commit to him. Therefore, it allows you now to go out and cherry pick and make your team better. I think when your trenches are set, it's the same thing. And it doesn't mean the players are going to work out just like you just said, but it does mean that you are committed to those guys. You have committed resources to them, and they better work out. And you ain't treating it like you're trying to hedge your bets. And now the Dallas Cowboys have the luxury of sitting back and cherry picking secondary positions. If you don't believe me, listen to what they're saying post-draft here on Locked On Cowboys.
Everybody knows that wide receiver is at the very top of their need list. But after receiver, which we'll get to in a second, what do they need to accomplish before week one?
How does everyone feel about the Cowboys draft? What's the general consensus? And then everyone's just basically been like, man, the Cowboys had a fantastic draft as long as they figure out this wide receiver too situation somewhere. So I obviously that's kind of, let's put that separate for over here for a second, because we'll have a whole conversation about that. Outside of that, I think we feel like, okay, they added a corner on the outside. You still have some questions about how that nickel situation is going to look. I think we like the re-signing of Izzy Mukuamu because we like Izzy Mukuamu a lot, and I do think that he has the capability of playing in that spot just based on what we've seen of him previously. But I think it would be nice to have a little bit more certainty here, maybe have another veteran presence here to kind of push him in that spot because, it's a lot of unknown. He does have kind of an unconventional body type for playing in the nickel.
Look at them sounding like rich people. Like all they worried about is a little nickel cornerback, David. Now, first of all, shout out to the Jaguars for poaching Jordan Lewis from a team that was cash strapped like Dallas, one of the 2 or 3 best nickels in the league, and he's now in Jacksonville because they couldn't afford to pay everybody. But listen to them sounding like rich people. You know why they can sound like that? Because they believe they have a wall in front of their quarterback, and they're committed to their quarterback, and they've improved the wall. Dallas is going to find a pass rusher. You know that. They keep getting them over and over again and losing them in free agency. But this is what being rich in the trenches and at the positions that are necessary for you to win. This is what it sounds like post-draft. They're sitting there talking about a little nickel cornerback.
Yeah, and then you're worried about your wide receiver number 2. And I'll tell Cowboys fans a little bit of a secret because I just got done covering a team and did this for an entire year. Now, they did go out this offseason and try to get themselves a true blue wide receiver number 2. But I promise you, there are going to be games where Deebo Samuel's your number 2 for the Washington Commanders. Noah Brown's going to look like your number 2 for the Washington Commanders. If Jalen Lane out of Virginia Tech develops quickly, he might be the number 2 receiver in certain games for the Washington Commanders. So is Zach Ertz, right? Austin Eckler might be that. That's the point. The Dallas Cowboys don't need a wide receiver number 2 on the overall roster. What they need is a wide receiver number 2 in each and individual game. One game, that might be Jonathan Mingo. One game, that might be a combination of Jaden Blue, the new electric running back they just got out of Texas, and Miles Sanders, a veteran who's been doing it for a little bit. Meanwhile, Javonte Williams is trying to hammer down that run game. Other games, Jake Ferguson might have an ideal matchup in the middle of the defense that you're facing against, and he's going to be your wide receiver too. The next game, it might be Jalen Tolbert with 3 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown, and he's your wide receiver number 2. So you would love to have a wide receiver number 2. Don't get me wrong, but you don't need a wide receiver number 2 if you have the right coordinator and a quarterback who understands how to execute what it is they're trying to put in place. So as long as their offense can come out and say, here's how we're going to attack this defense today, and Dak understands. Last week, I might have thrown Mingo 8 targets. This week, he probably only going to get 2, but Jalen Tolbert's going to get 8. Jalen Tolbert only got 2 last week. As long as Dak can be that kind of versatile quarterback, as long as the scheme can be versatile, and as long as CD is okay with not being a 20-target guy every single game, which I think he'll be all right. You can have a wide receiver number 2. You just may not have one or the same one every single week. It really only matters in fantasy. But on the football field, it's not going to matter at all if they can execute.
Look, and they had Brandon Cooks last year. Brandon Cooks ain't chopped liver. Just didn't work out. You know what I'm saying? For a long time, didn't they have Amari Cooper? Just didn't work out. I mean, sometimes, having that extra number 2, just think, if you have a number 2 receiver that you use a priority resource on or free agency money, that takes away from another area. That means you're going to lose one of those DBs. And so I don't think it's excuse making when people say, like, the GM for the Bills, Bean, he was on the radio that they say we can't do everything. He's right. You can't unless you're Philadelphia, because you draft real good on defense and you can just keep paying everybody on offense, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But good, I'm not going to beat up on Dallas. I'm not going to beat up on Locked On Cowboys because I understand exactly where they are. But it just shows you how when you commit to the positions that are super, super important, and a choice like Tyler Booker helps your group and your room. It gives you the confidence that you might not even know you have, and you'll be out here 2 or 3 days later when naming all the priorities of the team, talking about some nickel or some dime cornerback. That means that you are rich and you don't even know it. All right, we're going to talk more about the NFC East, but we're going to skip around them a minute because James has been creating beef. Yeah, I'm saying that jokingly. He's been creating beef with people all off season, and we got to dance around that foolishness here on Wednesday. Locked On NFL. You're going to leave them Bengals alone, man. I'm going to tell James why the Bengals did what they always do and why we can appreciate the fact that they might have got it wrong again. I appreciate the fact that they keep trying. We'll talk about the Bengals in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by our friends over at FanDuel. Man, those NBA playoffs are off the chain. They are. Some of these games are so close, man. It's coming down to the last minute, and I love the chippiness in it too. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on that action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Rolling along here on Locked On NFL, where it is your team every day, here with David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. When I inherit beef. When I'm cool with somebody, whatever they start, we start. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to give my boy every chance to be right. We'll coach in the locker room. I'll be like, Dave, you shouldn't have said that about James and Jake. But on the front street now, I got to protect the team and the shield. So James has been beaten up a little bit on the Bengals this offseason, rightfully so. But we had a spirited debate about the Bengals and what they did. And was it neglect or was it just incompetence? You can't knock them for not trying because I think they keep trying. I just think they keep getting it wrong. There's some people that think that they aren't trying at all. I think Tyler Rowland might be one of them. But listen to what Tyler says. He makes a lot of sense, but then he also proves our point. This is Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans and of course, Locked On NFL AM. And you'll see the branding on the show. It's the Locked On NFL show that comes on twice a day here. He's talking to Lauren Cox about the Bengals, and he goes in. Check this out.
One of the teams that have completely failed the offseason so far is the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think it's punctuated by their draft, but it goes further than that overall. You look at when they signed T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, which is the number one thing that people are going to say if they push back. Like, wait a minute, they brought back Chase, they brought back Higgins. How can you say it's a complete fail? Well, here's the thing. The contract structure that they used on those players was terrible. They did not use the opportunity to maximize cap space for this season when they should be going all in with Joe Burrow and that trio under contract. Now is the time, and they didn't take advantage of that. And I would guess that it's because the owner doesn't want to pay out a bunch of cash. We could talk about structure and contracts all we want, but cash is still a thing that matters to owners. And they're like, hey, we're paying all this cash. I'm not going to give you more cash to use elsewhere, so you might as well take the high cap hit now and make it front-loaded compared to back-loaded. And when we have more cash in the future, we'll have more salary cap space. I'm sure that's the logic there. But you didn't take advantage of the opportunity to create salary cap space. You still have Trey Hendrickson's situation hanging over you and your locker room. And then they go into the draft, and they take Shamar Stewart, who is the biggest project of the first round. They draft 2 linebackers in a bad linebacker class. And they take Dylan Fairchild, a guard out of Georgia, who is the lesser interior offensive lineman from that team, Tate Ratledge.
David, you might not have to say nothing to Jake, or you might not have to say nothing to James Rapine at Locked On Bingo. You might have to say nothing else. You might just get that clip right there, and every time you start beefing, just replay it. Bing, and listen to Tyler Rowland go, The Bengals have failed Joe Burrow. So what do you think, man? I know you agree with a part of that, though, at least.
So I agree. I've said it on this episode several times before, right? Like the paying of the wide receivers is problematic to me because it handcuffs you a little bit. You know what I mean? Look, the salary cap is incredibly flexible. The salary cap is fugazi, it's fake, it's whatever. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? So it's not something to be harped on too much, but when you do need some other resources on the other side of the ball, I do think that it can become problematic. And I also don't really like NFL teams that just kind of kowtow and bend the knee to the quarterback. You know what I mean? Joe Burrow is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan. and all those things. But, I think that the quarterback needs to be a part of the team and have the team's best interests in mind. And look, he probably feels like he does with T and Jamar both coming back. He probably does think that's the Bengals' best interest, right? So we might agree on that. We might just disagree on the way that it developed. And I think that's the point here. And this is the reason I hate post-NFL draft grades. I hate free agent signing grades. I hate trade grades because we have no idea what the future holds.
Right.
Now, I will agree. Jamar Stewart, number 17, feels rich to me.
Mm-hmm.
I will agree that a linebacker as your second pick in the second round, obviously, is a little bit weird. But here's the thing. I actually just did a little bit of research on this because I was talking about Trey Hendrickson on Locked On Commanders, and I ran into an opinion or analysis from another reporter that covers the Bengals, Ben Baby of ESPN, and he pointed out that if the Cincinnati Bengals move on from linebacker Jermaine Pratt, who also wants a new contract, and offensive lineman Cordell Volson, an interior offensive lineman, a guard, that clears up enough money to theoretically bring Trey Hendrickson back on the type of deal that he wants. So if you move past that linebacker and that interior offensive lineman, you potentially bring your edge back. You bring that edge who's going to now play opposite of Jamar Stewart, you assume, which is going to leave Jamar Stewart with much more advantageous matchups on his side. So while he is developing, because he does need to develop, all those athletic traits that everybody knows are there for Jamar Stewart, what wasn't there was the production. The traits were there. So all those traits are now going to get one-on-one matchups. They're not going to get chip blocks. They're not going to get extra help because they're going to be busy with Trey Hendrickson. That's going to accelerate his production and hopefully accelerate his development. Demetrius Knight Jr., is he going to be the next Jermaine Pratt? We'll see. Dylan Fairchild, is he the best interior offensive lineman out of Georgia? We'll see. Obviously, Tyler has a very strong opinion about it. Dylan Fairchild was actually one of my favorite interior offensive linemen, to be honest with you. But the Cincinnati Bengals obviously felt like Dylan Fairchild was a better interior offensive lineman out of Georgia for them. You know what I mean? And we've talked about their scouting history and all that stuff. But you see what the Cincinnati Bengals are doing. They're paying all their offense, and then they're going out there and they're drafting all their defense. The Philadelphia Eagles do the same thing. The Philadelphia Eagles pour all their money into the offense and all their draft capital into their defense. What's the difference between them and the Bengals? One, health. Jalen Hurts has not been hurt near as much as Joe Burrow has. Two, trenches. The draft picks that the Eagles have put on their offensive line, defensive line have worked tremendously. The offensive line and defensive line draft picks that the Bengals have picked have not. Okay? That's the big difference here. The approach is very much the same. I think when you look at the Bengals and Eagles, the approach is very much the same. The outcome is different, but it's not because of lack of effort, not because of lack of organizational integrity. Now, they may have a scouting problem. They may have a talent evaluation problem at the top. I don't know where the kink is. I think that's where Tyler certainly, his argument holds water. But for the record, James and Jake do a great job at Locked On Bengals. My beef is never with them. It just might be with the team they're covering. But as far as this draft is concerned, I think they did a bang-up job. And yeah, if the move is to get rid of Jermaine Pratt, get rid of Cordell Volson to keep Trey Hendrickson, then getting a linebacker in the second round, a guard in the third round makes all the sense in the world. The question you have now is, did you draft because you needed those guys to do these moves, or did they also happen to be the best players on the board? Because that is where we would disagree, is you should not be drafting because, we're going to lose a linebacker, so we need a linebacker, because that's a one-way street to, honestly, where the Bengals are right now. So
yep, you're absolutely right. And by the way, James and Jake do, everybody knows me and James Rapine used to be the Wednesday hosts on here. James and Jake do a great job. I use their clips awful a lot here on Locked On Bengals. It's all good and it's all fun. We just joking, y'all. That's just the way we are. But I will tell you,
I DM James every time I have a hot take about the Bengals.
Every single time, and that's a little
go back and forth on it.
I'm like, man, the joker's gonna get sick of you. But here's where I go with it. The Bengals are damned if they do and damned if they don't. And it's their fault that people think like this. It's their fault that we're going to just automatically assume the players that they drafted ain't about nothing, because a lot of the players they drafted ain't about nothing, right? But then this goes back to T. Higgins. When you do get it right, you need to keep it. And so the thinking is, if they haven't drafted well, when they did hit on a guy, keep him. The other thing is you can't fail Joe Burrow if you're doing what Joe Burrow wants you to do. All right. And Joe Burrow, and this is why sometimes with whether it's Joe Burrow, who people like, and Aaron Rodgers, who people don't, it's just not good for you to be listening to players, man, when it comes to a broad. You have to sometimes save them from themselves. But they did everything functionally that they were actually supposed to do. And just like you said, if you really look at it, they're emulating Philly. It's just that they're not as good at it. And unless you're going to fire yourself, that's not going to change anything for the Bengals. But I'm looking forward to what they do this year, because I do think if they stay healthy, especially they got about 3 offensive linemen at over 340, they can get to the point where they start putting it together. And I want to see if they can stay healthy and challenge in the AFC North. All right, let's get to the NFC East. We'll get to the Giants here. Good stuff from Patricia Trainer with them picking at number 3. Obviously, the Giants have some other needs, and she's going to reflect a little bit and show you how what they've done is they've gone a little bit old school. They've gone a little bit old school and done something to give them one of the characteristics of the Giants teams that won the Super Bowl. We'll talk about that and the rest of the NFC East in just a moment here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. Man, have you ever checked your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. It's easy collaboration stuff, man. Like managing money without your partner is smoother than ever. You can track, share, all shared and personal accounts, and then set goals and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first for you. Here, Locked On NFL, running it down here with David Harrison, segment 3. Going to get to some NFC East stuff right now. Patricia Trainer had a very, very, very interesting insight as to something that the New York Giants did. Everybody knows the Giants end up trading back into the first round, taking a quarterback after taking pass rusher and linebacker Abdul Carter. She said they did something else really, really subtle. I want to play it for you.
The New York Giants are going back to the future and building up their roster to be competitive again. You know, it's interesting. Once the dust settled from, free agency and the draft, I went back and I looked at how general manager Joe Schoen put together the New York Giants roster. And I can't help but notice that there was a lot of similarities to how the better teams of recent Giant years, or maybe a couple of decades ago, how they were put together. And I wonder if perhaps, Shane and, some of the earlier things he was doing when he first came in at GM, he realized they weren't working. So he kind of went back to the future, went back to the past, actually, to borrow some things that work for the Giants and other teams for that matter, in building up a roster. So I have a list here. The first thing that kind of stood out to me was the construction of the wide receiver group. Now, the top 3 receivers for the Giants, we know they're going to be Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson. But what Shane did in the offseason, not just, in the draft, or I should say the undrafted free agents, but also in free agency, he brought in taller guys, skyscrapers. Now, I have no idea how much these guys are going to see on offense as far as pass targets go. But you go back to the Eli Manning era, especially early on in Eli's career, and he had a couple of skyscrapers in Plaxico Burress and Amani Toomer.
The Giants are going to get bigger on the outside. When they did win, they did have bigger players on the outside. I know people are saying who's going to be throwing the ball. Well, it's going to be Russell Wilson this year and Jackson Dart in the future. Do you think the Giants did pretty good with their draft, considering it seems like their coach and their GM is kind of they're kind of lame ducks, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think they had a pretty good draft, right? I mean, Abdul Carter is the best defensive player in the class, so they go out there and get him. And I think that I should say best pure defensive player in the class. That's something that immediately Commanders fans were texting me, and they're like, bro, like what? That Giants defense is already pretty nasty. It's going to be real nasty now with Abdul Carter over there. So that's certainly a good pick. I'm not as high on Jackson Dart as some people were, heading into the draft process. But again, that's a conflict between my quote unquote evaluation of Jackson Dart and the Giants evaluation of Jackson Dart. You know what I mean? Obviously, theirs is going to matter a little bit more. I like Darius Alexander, the D tackle, and I kind of look at this, man. You got edge, you got D tackle. A lot of people are like, okay, well, when are they going to trade Kayvon Thibodeau? I don't know if they're going to, because here's the thing: if you're the New York Giants, and you look at this, you say, our offense may not be the most electric in the NFL. We may not be top 10 in scoring, top 8 in scoring. So that means our defense might be on the field a little bit longer. Well, now you got a new third-round D tackle to rotate in. Now you got a new first-round edge to rotate in. So you keep all your defensive players. You just keep them rotating because those boys are going to be tired. Those guys are going to be tired. Cam Scatteraboo, running back out of Arizona State. I'm a Sun Devil, so you know I love him, but I also love the fit. He brings that hammer to Tyrone Tracy Jr., the other back there in New York. That's a good tandem there. And Russell Wilson, you talk about those taller receivers. So not only the Giants' history, but you look at Cam, you look at Russell Wilson's history as well. Yeah. He likes to throw the ball high, and he likes to throw the ball far, and he likes to throw it towards the sideline or the corner of the end zone. Guess who's best suited to catch those passes?
Big tall physical guys. Receivers. Yep.
You know what I mean? So they also are going out. And so, yeah, it could be a little bit of going back to our roots a little bit as the New York Giants. Maybe they saw something on tape that says Jackson Dart likes to target those types of guys better too. But Russell Wilson certainly likes to target those types of dudes down the field. So they're fitting the current quarterback. Hopefully they're fitting their next quarterback for the Giants' sake. But yeah, I think that what they did, while I'm not sitting here like blown away by their class, I think it's a very solid class, and I think it fits what the Giants are trying to do.
I think it fits too. I think they did a pretty good job, like I said, considering everything. The Giants turned out to be a big story with the Shador thing, with everybody talking about his board work and his interview with the Giants. So they were an integral part of the draft in ways that they probably did not expect. We talked earlier about rich people and how they act after the draft. 2 days later, what are you talking about? Are you talking about offensive tackle? You talking about quarterback? Nah. And we've mentioned Philly 3 or 4 times in this show. Why? Because they're the example of the rich. And you know what I mean? They just won the Super Bowl. They just got tight end issues they have to figure out. Poor Philadelphia. Check out my man Lou Dibiase from Locked On Eagles.
It's time the Philadelphia Eagles show Dallas Goedert the money. I'll tell you why they have to bring back their star tight end. I think they need him on offense. And especially when you talk about Dallas Goedert leverage, you look at the extension of George Kittle today, that gives him a lot of power. When Trey McBride got that extension from the Arizona Cardinals a few weeks ago, I said it didn't really have a huge impact on Goddard's future in Philly. Why? Because number one, Trey McBride is a lot younger. Number two, he's a better player, I think, right now. And he hasn't had the injury history of Dallas Goedert. So when McBride got that $19 million a year contract, I didn't think it really impacted Goddard's standing with the Eagles. But after seeing George Kittle get that contract extension with San Francisco at 32 years old, he has an extensive injury history as well. Kittle's always dealing with something. After seeing that contract, that also went for $19 million a year annually for a player that's older and has an injury history as well. Dallas Goedert is not going to accept the 1-year pay cut.
Look, man, they're in a pickle a little bit, and I'll tell you why. And I know these are, like I said, rich people's problems. Dallas Goedert can play, and they are a different team when he's playing as opposed to when he's not. But they can't pay everybody. I mean, they're paying everybody on offense, bro. Everybody on. I think 10 of their 11 players are ranked in like the top 6 or 7 at their respective positions from around the league. This is a tough one to be in a little bit, and I feel what Lou is saying. But I also would tell you this. I don't think anybody outside of Philadelphia considers Dallas Goedert anywhere near as good as George Kittle when it comes to complete, because George Kittle is such a devastating blocker. So you got to be careful when you're comparing. But go ahead, David.
You know, it's a very interesting comparison that Lou makes. I think it's very accurate, but I think, and this is a conspiracy theory on my part, I'll tell you, I don't have any information on this, but people have to remember these GMs compete just as much as anybody else does. Like the NFL draft, the contracts, the offseason, that's their playing field, right? They compete just like anybody else in this business. If you're the San Francisco 49ers and you got cap space to burn because you're kind of in this little bit of a mini reset, right? The 49ers have kind of mentioned that. Like they're in a little bit of a mini reset where they're going to try to kind of settle their roster down, settle their cap situation down, settle the money down a little bit, and then kind of see if they can try to reset a little bit. Like 1 step back, 2 steps forward, right? Well, 2 steps forward are going to come next year, next offseason, all that stuff. This offseason is kind of settled. They trade Deebo Samuel, get rid of a lot of that money, all those things. So if you got money to burn, cap space to burn, Because don't forget, these NFL teams also have to spend a minimum amount of money, per like 3-year window or whatever it is.
Right.
And you're looking around the board and you're like, who can we hurt the most in the NFC with a new contract?
Oh, I finally see where you're
Philadelphia Eagles are one of those teams.
Oh.
We just talked about it. They pay their offense, they draft their defense. Okay, we're gonna make you pay because Lou just said it. Dallas Goedert is not taking lower money than George Kittle just got.
No,
he's not going to do it. Now, the reality of that contract is it's $10 million on average per year in guarantees for George Kittle, which is a lot less than $19 million total life of the contract if all the incentives and everything else are met, right? But it's $10 million per year guaranteed. Still, it puts the Eagles in a situation where now you're at the table. I mean, it's not unlike the Bengals. They're trying to deal with Trey Hendrickson. Every time another edge gets a market resetting deal, they got to be slamming their fists on the table going, dude, we're just trying to get this finished.
Right.
Because what did Trey Hendrickson say after the last big edge deal? It's not my fault. The market keeps changing. That's not my fault.
That's what it is, yeah.
I'm not going to take a pay cut.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas Goedert's market absolutely just changed. And what the NFL is hoping is that the Philadelphia Eagles have to let him walk now because that's a weapon off your table. And I would tell you right now, they don't have a Dallas Goedert waiting in the wings, and they didn't draft one either. So, you know what I mean? I'm not going to tell you it's going to like deflate the Eagles just completely,
right,
but it would certainly hinder them. And the Niners would be the ones that everybody who doesn't like the Eagles would have to thank for giving George Kittle this deal, which I guarantee you is front loaded because we can afford to blow all this money this year. And then next year is going to be cheaper, and we're going to have more money to take those 2 steps forward that we need to take.
And we get to hurt the team we don't like.
And we get to hurt the team.
Do you think they hurt him a little bit too when they traded Deebo Samuel to Washington? You think that was on the back of their mind since we're being petty?
I mean, look, if they're targeting the Eagles, yeah, I mean, that's a team they got to face twice a year now. You know what I mean? And Deebo is going to keep the Commanders' offense on the field longer. Hopefully, let him put more points up. More ball security than we saw in the 2 games of the Commander or 3 games of the Commanders played against the Eagles last year. So certainly could. And it's kind of like the SEC, man. Right? For years and years, you get the bowl season, and why do all these SEC teams lose to some of these ACC teams and all their stuff? Because they're beat up.
Yep.
Because they're beat up because they're in the toughest conference in college football. Well, the NFC East is starting to rise up a little bit, and the NFC East might start to look like a division that they're going to beat up on each other for half a season, and then when we get to the playoffs, like this team's missing a quarterback, that team's missing a star receiver, this one missing their linebacker, and all of a sudden these NFC East teams that are supposed to be the greatest are getting knocked off by wild card teams. Everybody goes, well, what's up with the NFC East in the postseason? Well, they had to get through the regular season to get to the postseason. That's what's up with them. So we'll see how it works out.
No doubt about it. I got about a minute, Dave. Can we? What's the significance and the importance of that new stadium going back to Southeast DC?
Yeah, man. The Washington Commanders going home to Washington D.C. and I think the greatest part of the story is it's a fan bringing them home. Right? Josh Harris grew up a fan of Washington football, had memories walking in RFK and the electricity of doing so, and so he is the principal person that is bringing this team home because. Not only is he the managing partner of the ownership group, the Washington Commanders are eating more of the expense for this stadium project than any team that has built a new recent stadium. No other group has eaten more expense for their new stadium than the Commanders are with this one, and it just shows how dedicated they are to getting back to DC. So, just even if it's just from a symbolic standpoint, great news that the Washington Commanders are returning to DC where they belong.
Possibility every time a stadium is built, there's always a possibility of a Super Bowl.
Oh, Super Bowl's going there. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to be a roof. It's going to be a roof stadium, a dome stadium. It might be retractable, might not. We don't know yet. The renderings have a glass roof, which is amazing. But it's going to be an enclosed structure, so there's absolutely going to be a Super Bowl in DC. The stadium's supposed to open in 2030, brother. I wouldn't be surprised. 2031, 2032. There's going to be a Super Bowl played there.
No doubt about it. It's always a Super Bowl here on Locked On NFL. Make sure you tap in each and every day. And if you're trying to win your fantasy football championships and your dynasty drafts and all of that stuff, there's no better place than Locked On NFL Scouting to find out just how much all those guys are going to play around the league. Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs can break all that stuff down better than anybody else, and you ought to be tuning in. Make sure you tap in wherever you get your podcast. All right, for David Harris and Tony Wiggins, we appreciate you spending 35 minutes with us today here on Locked On NFL. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.